Ravensburger just had their Lorecast stream for Set 5, and we've got some card reveals and some new products coming soon. So in this video, we're going to go over all of the cards revealed, the tone of the set, and what new stuff we can expect this August. So let's get into it. Set 5 has officially been revealed and is called Shimmering Skies. The theme of the set is celebration. The theme actually works on two levels, as in the world of Lorcana, they've defeated Ursula, which is what happened in the Ursula's Return quest. We're also celebrating on a meta level since, as the release of Set 5, Lorcana will officially be 1 year old. I like the theme of this set so far, since Ursula's Return was kind of dark. It's nice to see Ravensburger switch it up so we get a nice variety of not only the cards, but just of the tones. Shimmering Skies will launch at your local game store on August 9th and in big box stores on August 23rd. They also showed off some of the new products like the new intro product gateway, 2 new playmats, the booster box, troves, and starter decks, etc. But we also got a handful of card reveals on stream and then some more which were on the official website and in some other places. So let's dive in and take a look at some of the new cards. I've compiled everything that I could find that was revealed today in some form or another, so hopefully after I make this video, nothing new comes out. First up is Wreck-It Ralph, Demolition Dude, a inkable 3-cost, 1/4, Storyborn hero, quest for 1. His ability is Refreshing Break. Whenever you ready this character, gain 1 lore for each 1 damage on him. So I think this card's interesting, but I don't actually think it's going to see a lot of play, just because the whole moving damage off of things doesn't seem to be going anywhere. What I see most people doing is playing characters that already have damage on them. So think the Ruby Mother Gothel, or, the Ruby Beast, or the Ruby Mulan. And then either using something like Rapunzel or Julieta to heal. We did get some cards in Set 4 that let us move damage around, but they're not really seeing any play. And with the limited testing I've done, it's kind of janky, so it doesn't totally work. I don't think this card is awful. I just don't think it's really that great unless we get a lot of cards sort of like Teeth and Ambitions that put damage on your own cards to give you some sort of benefit. Then maybe this could be good, but I don't think the payoff is really worth it. Okay, next up is Vanellope von Schweetz, Super Rush Champ. She is an inkable, 1-cost, Storyborn hero, princess, racer. 2/2 and has 1 lore and is a vanilla. We've seen this card a million times. It's basically the same vanilla that we've seen in every set, in every color, over and over again, so there's not really much to say about it other than the art looks really good. But next up we have another Vanellope von Schweetz, random roster racer. Try and say that 5 times fast. She is an uninkable 4-cost 3/3 with 2 lore. She has Rush and her ability Pixelexia. When you play this character, she gains Evasive until the start of your next turn. I actually think this card is pretty good. In draft, I think it's very good. A 3/3 can take out a lot of things. It has Rush, and if it manages to survive that first turn, you play Rush and make it through your opponent's turn while it has Evasive. It can quest for 2 lore, so for 4 ink, getting to take out one of your opponent's thing and get 2 lore is not really anything to sneeze at. So I think in draft, this card's pretty good. In a constructed, it's going to be a little harder to maybe play this. I don't really know what decks will play this, but I mean, we'll see. We've only seen so many of Set 5 so far, but in draft, this is really good. I think even in constructed, this is pretty good. It's just really going to depend on what deck you're building and whether or not it fits in and whether it's worth having it in that uninkable slot. Next up, we have our first location. It is Bad Anon, Villain Support Center. It is an inkable 3-cost with a move cost of 2, 7 willpower, and its ability, There's No One I'd Rather Be Than Me. Villain characters gain Exert and pay 3 ink. Play a character with the same name as this character for free while here, and it has a passive lore income of 1. This card is interesting, but I don't think it's necessarily good. We still don't really have enough cards in the game right now to have something like a villain deck totally work, at least on like a meta competitive level. Later on in the game, when maybe we have more fun singleton formats and people are creating villain decks, maybe this sees some play in some world. It's very similar to the Emerald Hades that we saw just come out in set 4, which is, I believe, is exert this to sacrifice one of your characters and then play a character of that same name for free, which is really interesting. But again, it's like you're not getting the benefits of shifting that character, which you can use to like quest immediately or use an ability immediately or anything like that. You're just sort of avoiding the cost to get it out. I don't think this card is that great. I could be proven wrong. I don't think it's good in draft. I don't really think it has a place in constructed. It's funny, it's cute, it fits with the theme, but I don't think this card's playable, unfortunately. Next up, we have a really interesting card that I have a lot to say about. This is Elsa, the 5th Spirit. It is a inkable 5-cost, 2/5 with rush and evasive and quests for 1 lore. She has an ability called Crystallize. When you play this character, exert chosen opposing character. Really interesting. When I first saw this card, I thought, wow, this is nuts. I love it. But then I kind of read it a few more times. I looked at the stats, and I am not as high on this as I was before. I will say the art is incredible. It's very, very good. I love it. I love the rush. I love the evasive. I just think it costs too much. If this card was like an inkable 3-cost or even an uninkable 3-cost, and was a 2/3 instead, I think this would be the perfect Diablo counter. This would be amazing because if you're not on the play, so if you went second, you're on the draw, you know, your opponent plays Diablo. Diablo is not exerted, so they haven't drawn a card yet. You play this on turn 3, you get to target Diablo, tap it, or exert it, and then rush right into it and survive, basically. It's very similar to Peter Pan Shadowfinder in that way, except his ability is totally different. I think people would play this over Peter Pan Shadowfinder to get rid of Diablo instead. It would be awesome, but unfortunately that is just not the way it is gone down. This is a pretty expensive card for what it is, I think. Rush and Evasive together are very good. And should not be, sneezed at or have your, don't turn your nose up at it. Those are great as a great combination. The ability is fantastic. It's just sort of, what am I using this against? Really hard to say other than, a Diablo, but by then it's been 2 or 3 turns of your opponent drawing off the Diablo. So you're kind of showing up late to the party with this, unfortunately. I think in draft, this card is fantastic and you should probably take it like the second it shows up in a pack, because Rush and Evasive are just incredible together, especially, honestly, even alone in draft, they're amazing, but together they're even better in a draft setting. And 5 health is pretty good in draft. In constructed, I really don't know if this sees any play. It's just, it's lacking in some of the key areas I think that would make it playable in the meta currently, unfortunately, because I think this card's really cool and I want it to be cool, but it's just not quite there. It's like almost there, It's also only got 2 attacks, so it is susceptible to things like Brawl and Madame Medusa, so that is also unfortunate. So, really cool card, really interesting, has tons of keywords, which is interesting. I think in draft, it's great, but unfortunately in constructed, as much as I would love to see some play, I don't think it will, but, hopefully I'm proven wrong. All right, next up we have Bruni. I think it's Bruni. Bruni, Fire Salamander. He is an inkable 4-cost, 2/2 that quests for 2 lore. He has Evasive and his ability, Parting Gift. When this character is banished, you may draw a card. This card, it rules. It's super good. Obviously, it's a little understated for a 4-cost, but in constructed, I think this is great if you're playing Amethyst aggro, so Emerald Amethyst aggro. I would even say you could probably swap out some of your Merlin rabbits for this, just because you want to try and get that lore. Obviously, you don't get the bounce effect as much, so you don't draw as many cards, but if you're just trying to race to 20 lore as fast as possible, I think this is a way better choice than rabbit, but it's going to really depend on what you're trying to achieve in that deck. In draft, I think this card is incredible, and it's an uncommon too, which means that it's probably going to be used a lot in draft. And I think if you see this in a pack and the rest of the pack is not that good, you take this immediately because it's just so good. There's so many benefits. It's evasive, so it's really kind of awkward to get rid of in draft. It quests for 2 lore. It gets you a card, which is really hard to come by in draft. Card draw is just really difficult to get in some sets or in some draft formats. This card's amazing in draft. In constructed, I think it's pretty great, but it only really goes in, I would say, aggro decks. But I really like this card a lot. Okay, next up, we have Kristoff, Reindeer Keeper. This is an uninkable 9-cost. Oof. 3/7 that quests for 3 lore, Dreamborn ally. He has Bodyguard and his ability, Song of the Herd. For each song card in your discard, you pay 1 ink less to play this character. So this is basically another Chernobog, except for Steel Song. So Chernobog is also a 9-cost, and I believe a 9/9 that gets 1 ink cheaper for every character in your discard. So this is basically that, but for songs, except this doesn't shuffle songs back into your deck. I think if it did that, this card would be just obscene, but it's not quite that. I think it's very interesting. I think it will maybe see some play in Steel Song specifically. Maybe you run 1, maybe 2, but probably only 1 of these in a Steel Song just to see if you can get that 3 lore, or if you want to bodyguard your aerials or something. But it is susceptible to Madame Medusa. It's susceptible to Ice Block Brawl. It's interesting and kind of good in that one specific deck if you can make it work, which is why I think maybe you only run 1, maybe 2. Because unlike Chernobog, when you play Chernobog and shuffle all the characters back into your deck, suddenly if you have another Chernobog, that one costs a lot more all of a sudden, when one of them might have only cost you 4 or 5, right? So in that sense, it's a little better than Chernobog, but at the same time, it has some negatives going for it that I think really hamper it. But there is a chance that this is played as like a one-of in Steel Song, because it's just like a really beefy character that you can get out after the game's been going on for a little bit, but it is susceptible to a lot of the popular removal items that are going around right now. So I would see this as a card to keep your eye on, but I don't think this card is necessarily insane or good. I think in draft, this is going to be really difficult for you to play because you're just not going to have that many songs, and you're never going to get that high in ink in draft. So in draft, I think this is almost unplayable, to be honest. But in constructed, I think it has a little bit of a place. It's going to really depend, but really interesting card, and we'll just have to see how it shakes out. Okay, next up, another location. So we have the Great Illuminary, Radiant Ballroom. So this is an inkable 3-cost location with a move cost of 2 and 9 willpower. It has no passive lore, and its ability is Warm Welcome. Characters with support get +1 lore and +2 willpower while here. This is interesting. I think it's basically unplayable in draft, unfortunately, just because, unless there's a ton of support cards in set 5 that we just don't know about yet, support just does not see a lot of play outside of things like draft. I don't really see it in constructed really at all for the most part. The move cost is kind of expensive. The only deck I could really see this going in, and I was surprised that it never really took off, because when this card was announced, people were really interested in it, but it is the Alice from set 2, I believe, where if you, where all characters gain support, and then if she ever has 10 more attack, so, you use all of your other characters to quest and give her their strength, then she gets bigger, and then she will get up to 5 lore. I think it's really interesting. I think there may be a world in which there's a deck that is Sapphire Steel and is very support heavy, uses things like Alice and tries to move things here just so that you can get more lore and really defend stuff and try and buff up Alice as much as possible. Maybe throw some lucky dimes in there. I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of a meme deck. Maybe it's fun. I don't know. It's a little bit of a shame to me, because I think that Alice card is really cool, really interesting, opens up its own archetype. It's just that the archetype doesn't really have a lot of support. So maybe this is the first sort of instance of that seeing some support. Maybe it could be cool. I don't know. If you were to just throw this into the meta right now, I think this card is basically unplayable. In draft, I think it's basically unplayable. But I can see a world where there's that one deck that runs Alice, and this is sort of one of its cornerstones, And, 9 willpower on a location is nothing to sneeze at. It's really difficult to get rid of. This could be cool, but I'm going to go ahead and say, outside of the possibility of that one deck ever existing and being good, that this card is unfortunately not very good. Alrighty, next up we have Scar, Vengeful Lion. He is an inkable 4-cost, 4/2 Storyborn villain with ward, and he quests for 1. His ability is Life's Not Fair, Is It? Whenever one of your characters challenges a damaged character, you may draw a card. I don't like this card. I'm sorry. I know there are probably people out there that do like this card. I am not one of those people. I don't think this card is that great. I think ward helps it a bit, be okay. But the fact that it's a 4-drop and only has 4/2, I think just makes it a lot worse. The fact that this doesn't have to be the one that challenges damaged characters does make it better. I will acknowledge that, but just with the way the meta is now, people aren't really damaging characters and leaving them on the board. For the most part, they are taking them out one and done, or they're just taking out a damaged character. So the only way I see this really working is oh, you have a character and then you play this and they have one of their characters exerted like a Maui that took something out, and you attack into it and you sack, you're going to lose what you're using, but you get to draw a card. It's yeah, I guess that's okay, but I don't know. I'm a little underwhelmed by this card. It just doesn't seem amazing. There could be a world where it is amazing, but I'm not convinced that this is that good a card. Even in draft, I don't know that I would take this. It just doesn't seem as useful as I would want it to be, unfortunately. All right, we finally got it. So we finally have You're Welcome. It is an inkable 4-cost song, and it reads, shuffle chosen character, item, or location into their player's deck. That player draws 2 cards. This card is fascinating because yes, while you're playing this on your opponent, they're going to get to draw 2 cards. That's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're getting rid of something that is just really, really hard to get rid of. This can be played. This also synergizes well if you want to play it against yourself. If you're playing items, if there's an item you don't need and you want to get rid of it and draw 2 cards, or if getting rid of your opponent's location is just so much more important than them drawing 2 cards, or if you have some ability where every time they draw a card, you do something. There's just a lot of use cases for something like this. While on the initial read, it's kind of well, why would I want to give my opponent 2 cards? And yeah, most of the time, you probably don't. But the thing is, this targets so many things, characters, items, and locations. So anything basically on the board you can target with this card, and it just does some interesting things. If you're playing Emerald Amethyst and you have a Merlin Rabbit on the board, you can sing this with the rabbit, target him, have him target himself. He'll get shuffled back into your deck, and then Rabbit will leave the field, and you'll draw a card for him, and you'll draw 2 cards off this. So you'll basically have the Rabbit go away and get 3 cards, which is nuts. That's just an insane play. It's amazing. So I think this card is good, but it's really going to depend on how you use it and what you use it in. I think people who are really good at the game are going to find some really cool interactions with this card, and people who are not so good at the game are going to think this card is bad, and they're also sort of going to be right at the same time. It's really interesting. I think this card is really, really good, and we'll actually see some play in set 5. Okay, next up, one that I don't think is so good. We have Franck, Head of Security. We have an uninkable 7-cost card, 6/6, Floodborn ally captain with shift 5 and quests for 1. His ability is, are you on the list? During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may play a character with cost 5 or free. Sorry, cost 5 or less for free. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say that in the current state of the game, this card is sort of unplayable. It seems good, but I just don't think it's very good. I think if there are some lower cost Kronks that we are not aware of that come out in set 5, then this card becomes better. I don't really know what deck it goes in outside of maybe like a Ruby Steel sort of fighting matters, aggressive combat sort of deck. Like maybe, you know, this is something it goes in. But the only 2 Kronks we have are both 6 costs, and they don't see play, and you don't really want to shift this onto that. And it's just, I'm not a believer in this card. It's the same way that Mickey from set 3, I believe, the trumpeter Mickey, where if you tap, you could like pay, you got like characters out for free. Doesn't see any play. It's like it reads really strong, but when you actually think about it, it's super slow. So many things take it out, and you have to have something in your hand that's actually good. If you top deck this, you're probably angry because you can't take advantage of it. Like, this card isn't good on its own, right? Like it requires you to have arguably better cards that you just don't want to pay for. I don't think this card is that good. I wouldn't play it in draft. I wouldn't play it in constructed. I could be proven wrong, but I'm not a believer in this card. I don't like it. I'm sorry. Alrighty, next up, I really love the art on this card. I love the hidden Mickey. I'm a big cooking nerd, so big fan of this. This is Donald Duck Pie Slinger. It is a 5-cost, inkable, 3/6, Floodborn Hero Knight, which is amazing. I love that it has the Knight keyword, even though it's just like Chef Donald. It's very funny. Has Shift 4, Quest for 1. It has 2 abilities. Its first ability is Humble Pie. When you play this character, if you used Shift to play him, each opponent loses 2 lore. His second ability is Raging Duck. While an opponent has 10 or more lore, this character gets +6 strength. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. There are a lot of Donald cards, but a lot of them are around the same cost as this, and I don't think you would really want to shift on them. The only one that I think you would really want to shift this on, and I think its primary target, is Donald Duck Boisterous Fowl, which is the 1-cost 2/3 from set 1, I believe, the vanilla. I don't know, you know, like the shift is not great, but paying 5 for this is not terrible. But then you have Humble Pie, you know, you play the shift and each opponent loses 2 lore, which is not a thing that is used a ton. It doesn't really see tons of play because at the end of the day, it doesn't make a huge impact on the game, to be honest. It just, every time someone has made me lose 2 lore, I'm just like, okay, you know, I'm going to get that lore back in a second, you know, it's not really that big a deal. So not really sure about that. And then also Raging Duck. While an opponent has 10 or more lore, this character gets +6, which sounds like a lot. It becomes a 9/6, which is pretty big, and also takes it out of the ice block brawl sort of thing, and it makes it to Madame Medusa. The problem is both of these abilities conflict with each other. Humble Pie is taking lore away from your opponent, but Raging Duck wants your opponent to have lore. So if you shift this on a turn where your opponent has 10 lore and you take 2 away, you're not getting Raging Duck, at least for that turn. He's coming out and he's a 3/6. And before your opponent quests, they're probably just going to remove it from the board and then quest back up to what you lost. So, man, this card is weird. It's super weird, and just the abilities do not gel together. I do think in draft this card is decent because, you know, if your opponent has 10 lore, getting lore is a lot slower in draft, so actually having a 9/6 on the board is really threatening and can help you catch up. In constructed, I don't think this sees play. Even then, the 2 abilities not really gelling together just kind of ruins it for me. And honestly, in the meta right now, if you're playing against Ruby Sapphire or you're playing against Sapphire Steel, if your opponent's at 10 lore, you're probably losing in the next turn or 2, and a 9/6 is not going to save you. So, I don't know. I'm not as hot on this. I really love the art. I love the idea of this card, but I just think it's very strange and very just weird. Next up, we have my favorite card revealed today. So this is Merlin, Intellectual Visionary. It is an uninkable 6-cost, 3/7 Floodborn Mentor Sorcerer with Shift 5, and he quests for 2 lore. His ability is Overdeveloped Brain. When you play this character, if you used Shift to play him, you may search your deck for any card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So we have the first sort of tutor effect that is just any card in the game, which sounds really strong, but you do have to shift this Merlin to make it happen. So that is a limit. The other limit is that you're not probably going to play this in most Sapphire decks, because the current Merlin that we have that's not in Amethyst is the Sapphire one that has something to do with support. I'll put the card up on the screen here. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it has something to do with support. It's not really played. It's kind of awkward. I don't think it goes really with what Sapphire's trying to do in the meta right now. I think the only place this card really exists is in blue-purple, which honestly is my favorite color combination and has not seen a lot of support or, play much since set 1, but it was my favorite deck from set 1. It was like really strong off-meta color that not a lot of people played, but if people who did play it, we got it. It was awesome. It was really fun. I think this goes great in blue-purple because there's just a lot more Amethyst Merlin targets. Like you have Merlin Goat, you have Merlin Crab, you have Rabbit. I'm sure I'm forgetting one, but that already, you're pretty much running all of those in any kind of deck that is playing Amethyst at all. This slots perfectly into that, if you really are like, man, there's a big tank on the other side of the board and I really want to get rid of it, and I don't have a Hades to get rid of it. Shift this down, go get the Hades, and you have the perfect answer for it next turn. I think this is a really cool card. I think it only goes in like one deck, basically, unfortunately. So while its ability sounds really strong and really good, I don't think it's going to see a lot of play outside of Blurple, and who knows if Blurple will be good. I've been waiting for it to be good again since set 1 sort of ended, and it hasn't. So, one day maybe it'll come back, and then if it does, I think this is the perfect card for it. But, it remains to be seen. But either way, I think the art on this is great. I think the ability is really cool. The questing for 2 is sort of irrelevant because it is susceptible to things like Madame Medusa and Ice Block and all the main removal things. So yeah, really interesting card, really cool, powerful in quotes, I would say, card. We'll just really have to wait and see, but I do like this card. Regardless of its ability to be played in the meta, I actually really like this card. Next up, we have Turbo Royal Hack. It is an uninkable 2-cost Storyborn Villain Racer with 2/3 Rush, and it quests for 1. Its ability is Game Jump. This character also counts as being named King Candy for Shift. Really hard to evaluate this card right now just because we haven't seen King Candy yet, so we have no idea if King Candy is even worth playing, right? Like if King Candy is really good, then this card suddenly becomes, this is a really good choice for your 2-drop because it's a rush that can take out a 2, it can do 2 damage to something, and it has 3, so maybe it can survive something, and it's also a shift target for King Candy, but like no idea what King Candy looks like in draft. I think this is an okay pick, but yeah, really hard to evaluate this right now. We're gonna have to just wait and see. All right, so next we've got Rancis. I'm going to say that's right. Rancis Fluggerbutter Chocolate Charger is an inkable 4-cost 4/4 vanilla that quests for 1 lore. It is what it is. I think if you've got no other 4-drops in your draft deck, sure, play Rancis. Is it great? It's a little boring, but I mean, in draft, it'll get the job done. I don't think this ever sees constructed play just because vanillas are sort of just not played anymore. We're at kind of that point in the game, so I don't think you ever see this card really. All right, we've got the first of 2 Taffyta Mutton Fudge cards. This is Crowd Favorite. It is a inkable 1-cost 1/2 Storyborn Ally Racer that quests for 1. Her ability is Showstopper. When you play this character, if you have a location in play, each opponent loses 1 lore. I don't like this card. Like we talked about before, I don't think taking lore away from your opponents is really that good yet. It's going to take some sort of things like, every time your opponent loses lore, draw a card, or every time your opponent loses lore, gain lore, which would be really interesting and cool. I think maybe at some point like that could be cool, but the fact that you need to have a location in play for this to even do it, and it's a 1-drop, just makes it really awkward and strange. I wouldn't play this constructed. I wouldn't play this in draft either. I don't think this card's very good. All right, and then we have the second Taffyta Mutton Fudge Sour Speedster. This is an inkable 4-cost 3/3 with shift 2 and a quest for 1 lore. Her ability is New Roster. Once per turn, when this character moves to a location, gain 2 lore. I don't know if this sees constructed play. Moving to a location, it kind of will depend on what location you really want to move her to. You know, if you have the dream scenario where you have 2 locations and you can constantly just move her, like race her back and forth between locations, I think that's kind of neat and cute. Whether or not that's a thing you'll even be able to pull off and construct it in set 5, who knows? I mean, we haven't seen all the cards. Kind of interesting. I wouldn't necessarily play this in draft. I think this is like a desperation pick in draft. You know, I need 4 drops and it's inkable, you know, so what's the worst that could happen? I don't think you're really going to be moving this to locations in draft, really. I mean, you might, but yeah, I just think it's okay. It's okay in draft, TBD in constructed, but my gut says probably not great. But, you know, I love to be proven wrong. When I say a card's bad, I want to be proven wrong, but I don't see it. All right, we're almost there. So this is Snowana Rainbow, which I actually think that name's very funny. Cool Competitor is an uninkable 3-cost, 2/4 Storyborn ally racer that quests for 1 lore, and she has Rush. So it's a French vanilla card. It's okay. Would you play this in draft? Maybe. I think it only having 2 strength really hurts it. The 4 willpower is kind of nice, but yeah, the 2 strength kind of hurts it. I don't think you ever see this in constructed play in draft. Maybe, again, I think it's kind of like the last card. Like maybe if you're just desperate enough and you just really need cards, like maybe you play this, but I'm not totally seeing it. I don't know if this sees a ton of play. Okay, last but not least, this is the same card. While it looks different, one of them is a promo and one of them is not. So the one on the left is the Prince John that you will get in packs, and the one on the right is actually a promo that you will get for buying a Disney Villainous product that will come out, I believe, sometime in August. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I believe you can pre-order it now. So if you're really interested in the promo, you know, you can go pre-order it. But otherwise, you can get this card in packs. And actually, shout out to Ravensburger for doing that. I'm glad that they don't just have like a random card that's only available as a promo. That would not be the business. I appreciate that the promo is just also, you know, it's available in the packs. It just looks different. So I appreciate that. But this card is actually really interesting. So let's get into it. So this is Prince John Gold Lover. It is an inkable 4-cost with 3 strength and 4 willpower, Storyborn Villain Prince. He quests for 1, and his ability is Beautiful Lovely Taxes. Exert this character. Play an item from your hand or discard with cost 5 or less for free exerted. Really interesting. I think this card probably thrives best in Sapphire Steel, especially because in Sapphire Steel you're running 4 Popsicles and 4 Fortispheres, so you can draw cards. So if you're using something like Flaversham to break your Popsicles and stuff and you want to get them back from your discard pile and draw a card, I think this card's really good at that because it doesn't matter if Popsicle's exerted. It literally doesn't matter because you can just exert this, grab Popsicle out of your discard pile, play it exerted, and you're still going to draw a card. So I think that's pretty cool. And then you've probably drawn the card from Hiram, or drawn 2 cards from Hiram the previous turn. This being a 4-cost means that it sort of competes with Hiram for its spot, so that is a little rough, but I do think this card's really interesting and really cool. In constructed, I think it will maybe see a 1 or 2 of play in something like Sapphire Steel. In draft, probably not, just because it's going to be really hard to get items in a draft format. It's going to be really difficult to like have it kind of ready to go to do this. But I think it's a really interesting card that only maybe goes in 1 deck, but I think in that 1 deck, it's pretty useful. But I bet people who play a lot of Sapphire Steel will probably debate whether or not this is worth it. I think this card's pretty cool and could actually see some play. But in draft, I don't think I would really use this outside of it just being a random 4-drop because I needed a 4-drop. But really interesting card, really neat, and I really like the promo. The promo's really neat. So yeah, that was everything revealed today. Lots of cool stuff. I'm looking forward to the new set, and yeah, this is pretty cool. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the Sorcerer's Hat and hit the bell button to be notified when I release more Lorcana content. Love y'all. Bye-bye.